Hello, and welcome to our webinar about the new one2edit data sources feature. This feature facilitates the automation of data transfer to InDesign documents, avoiding manual copy-paste workflows. So I'd like to first quickly point out there's a marketing handout available for download through the Handouts panel in the GoToWebinar interface. And you can also pose questions via the Questions panel there. So the current process when creating data-rich collateral is to manually copy-paste or even transcribe data from the data source into your InDesign documents. And we're not just talking about tables of data. These data often appear in the body text of documents such as flyers, brochures, financial reports, etc. Furthermore, you may need to collate data from multiple sources worldwide, all in different time zones, into a single document. This is a recipe for stress and human error. Some specific challenges faced by this manual copy-paste approach are the last-minute provision and approval of data, the transfer of complex data by hand, for example, the results of formulae in a spreadsheet, the high standards of accuracy required, especially in financial documents, and multiple data sources and target types, given a high diversity of marketing collateral. one2edit data sources can help to alleviate these sources of stress. The way that one2edit data sources can help is by automating the manual procedures. Updates to the source data are automatically pushed to all relevant documents. This allows for a so-called single source of truth to be used for data across a diverse selection of collateral. In addition, multiple sources can be used for single documents. For example, if you have figures coming from multiple regions, that must all be collated into a single document. So how exactly does one2edit data sources work? one2edit data sources enables you to link Excel file cells to text segments in an InDesign document. Whatever data is placed into the cell will be pushed to the linked segment or segments in one2edit so that you can be confident in the accuracy of your data. Cells can be linked to any text segment. It is not limited to tables. So this is not a method for editing tables and table structures in one2edit, but instead permits this single source of truth for your data. Furthermore, the document data can be set to update automatically when the Excel source is changed. This works for formula-driven data as well as for raw data. This not only saves time, but ensures that even complex data are correctly entered into your collateral. Additionally, regional variations of data, for example pricing, can be accommodated by linking language versions to region-specific Excel files. This allows you to seamlessly integrate the one2edit data sources functionality into your existing one2edit translation workflows. The only requirement is that the regional Excel file has the same layout as the original Excel file. As well as translation workflows, the new one2edit data sources feature works seamlessly with other existing one2edit functionality. For example, you can edit files directly in the one2edit global file system, automatically pushing updates directly to the InDesign file with no download or upload steps. You can use the change history function to see what data was updated in your documents and when. And you can take advantage of the one2edit text rules to ensure that your data is formatted correctly. For example, changing dots to commas for regional decimal separators. And we'll see these features in action during our live demo. However, first, I'd like to run a quick poll asking how familiar the aforementioned data transfer problems are to you. We can see then that the bulk come across these problems sometimes. So they crop up from time to time. And nobody's ticked the I never see these issues, which is good. So we'll now continue on with our live demo in one2edit itself. So we have our normal one2edit login here, and I can log in with my webinar user. So we've got a couple of documents, and these are linked to Excel files. So if I look, for example, quickly at the technical data sheet here, we'll see in the project details window, we can see that there's a data sources tab here. This data sources tab shows us what data sources are linked to this particular project. In this case, there are 2 Excel files, a product list, and a price list. Now, if I go to my file browser, we can see that I've got my global file system client here, logged into our demo system, demo1toedit.com. And I can see my files directly here, directly in my laptop. And if I go to my Excel, I can open, for example, the product list, the English product list, and we'll talk about the regional stuff in a minute. So if I get this product list, and I'll just shove that in the in the top left. And we've also got our price lists, and my EN price list is here. And I will put that on the bottom left so that we can see them. And these are the 2 files that are linked to this particular project. So we'll just quickly open this in the editor as normal. And we're going to see some text in red inside this document because I've got a grep style set up. And what I've done is I've actually put double brackets around essentially variables. And this variable text is and it's not a requirement, it's just something that I've done because it makes it easier for me. I can very easily segment these particular variables out using the normal segmentation rules. And the fact that they've got the red brackets around them, I just have a grep style to style that in red so that when I replace the text, it then reverts to its correct color. I don't have to go through manually coloring the data. And at the top here, I've got 2 content groups. I do have my data sources numbers in a particular content group, but that's actually so that we can use a text rule later on to control the decimal separator. So it's not a requirement, and you can update text using the data sources without having that text segment in a content group. So it doesn't have to be editable by any means. And we just have it in one here so that we can assign a target language. And the translation group is absolutely standard translation. You just put this in and you can go through a normal translation workflow. So if I open my document info panel on the left here, and we can see that I've got the 2 data sources here listed, so the product list and the price list. Now the bulk of this data comes from the product list, whereas the batch sizes, as we can see in our price list Excel file here, the batch sizes come from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to manually pull the data through first, just to show you that they are linked. So I can just click this to manually update it in the editor. So we can see the data gets pulled through, the product type, and what we're looking at here is all the data from the top line. So essentially from this particular product at the top here. So that this is a data sheet for this product. So we can see the values are horizontal in the Excel sheet and they're in a vertical table here. So there's no link between the structure of the tables. The batch sizes here, as we can see, they haven't been updated yet, so I'll pull through those updates from the price list. And what's interesting is you can see that they're duplicated. So there's one variable here and one variable down here, or one linked segment here and one linked segment here, and here and here and here and here. So they're all coming from the same place. So if, for example, I were to update my batch size A here for this product, and if I then click save to save my changes, now if this particular document was closed, then it wouldn't be write protected, and any changes we made would be automatically pushed if we wanted them to be. Whereas if I just, let's zoom in a bit more here. And what we've got is we've changed the 25 to a 30. So I'm going to have to manually pull this update through because the document is currently open by me. So you can see that 30 came through here and also to here. So they are both linked to the same Excel cell. So we're going to quickly just close this document. I hope I've shown you that there are links between the Excel files and the InDesign documents. And what we're going to show you now is we're going to work a little bit outside of the editor just to show it happening automatically. So if I look at my data sheet again and I open my properties window, I look at the change history for the technical data sheet, we can see that all the segments that I pulled through were all pulled through by this particular webinar admin, because that's who I'm logged in as, and I did the updates manually in the editor. Whereas if I look at the price list here, which has been closed this whole time, and if I look at the change history, because it was closed, it allowed the data sheet or the data sources to automatically push the price list data in here. So you can see that it's done by system in this case. And we can see that there's a lot of variable data in here that has been replaced using the values from the Excel file. So what I'm going to quickly now look at is if I set this batch size, let's say set it back to 25. And you can see that when I do this, when I set this value to 25, the total price of the pack changes as well from 660 down to 550. Because this is a formula. So what we're going to get is, because we make one change to this value, two changes are actually going to get pushed. So I'm going to quickly just save that file. And at the same time, I'm going to go over here and I'll change my diameter value from 6 to 6.5. And I can go up here and I can click again on save. And if we have a look, we can see that currently the data sources is updating these two documents because they're both closed, so they can both be updated automatically by the system. Okay. I'll just wait for it to finish so that it will show up in my history, and I click refresh. So this is again the price list change history. And if we look at the price list change history here, we can see that when I changed the batch size from 30 back to 25, we can see that the formula calculated by this value was also changed in the document. And when I updated the segment, or the diameter, sorry, all the segments because the diameter is featured in the price list in this case to differentiate the products, all of those were pulled through because I made a change to this document, and therefore all of the linked values that weren't already there get pushed through. However, it doesn't happen every single time. If most of the values are only there, it only just forwards pushes the changed values through. So I'm going to quickly then look at is I'll open the price list here so that we can see the values in situ in the document. Let's just zoom in a bit. So we can see here that we've got, again, I've got the two groups. The translation group in this case is actually the column headings here, and they're going to be pre-translated automatically in the next portion of the demo. But we can also see here that I've got the 6.5mm diameter that's been pulled through. I've got the 25 per pack. I've got the £5.50 per pack. And these as well have a pound sign because that is how I have set up my documents in this case. So my pricing, I have put the currency symbol into the cell. Obviously, I could have it in the column header if I wanted to, but in this case, I don't. So this way we can see that there are automatic updates being pushed through when the source gets changed. So again, I'll just jump out of here. And what we'll do now is we'll create a regional price list, in this case for Germany, and I'll link in a regional price list Excel file just for that version document. So I create the version document as I normally would. I click Project, Create Version. The version document is created here. Excuse me. If we just quickly go and look in my file browser, we can see the price list. We can see the German price list here. And so I'll take that and I'll put that on the top right. And I'll actually just push you over to the left. And then the German technical data Excel file is here. And that I'll just put it down in the bottom right. So we can see here that there are differences, big ones in the price list being the fact that there's a euro symbol in there. And let's just scroll that back. And also the description of each of the products is in German in this case. So they will be brought through automatically. They're not going to go through a translation workflow because they're linked here and they're not in the translation content group. So you could, for example, also have the column headers being linked from here, but I'm not going to do that in this case. So I have these two localized, if you will, Excel files with regional data. And I'm going to link them in now to this document. So we could do this relinking in the middle of a translation workflow if we wanted to. It doesn't really matter when we do it because it's not part of the workflow. So if I click for the price list here, I'm going to click relink. It was connected to the English one. I'm going to choose the German one. I click choose. For relink here, I'm going to choose it was connected to the English one. I'm going to click choose Produktblatt.de and choose that and apply my changes. So now this regional, so German translation, actually I should change that, shouldn't I? So that we know it's for Germany. So this German version document has now got the German data linked into it. And I can push the update from here manually if I wanted to. You can see that there's checkboxes for automatically updating when the source is changed or not. Once we have a workflow on there, we can also choose which step of the workflow that the workflow will be reset to, that this data will be reset to if the data was in a workflow itself. So maybe it's in an approval workflow. And every time somebody changes it, we want those changes to be pushed back for review in one2edit. So that's possible to do as well. So there's a few different things you can work with like that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to start the translation workflow, and then I'm going to make some changes in the documents here to automatically push them. And then we'll see what it looks like in a translation job. So I go in here, I add a workflow from a template, English to German, select, and then I'm going to start it. We can see this is a standard translation workflow. I've got a user, I've got a pre-translation action. The data sources content, on the other hand, while it does have a target language, it doesn't have any users because it doesn't need any users in this case. As I said, you could have a review approval process here if you wanted to. But what we're using it for is for these text rules. And we've got our decimal separators from dots to commas. And this is set up to only apply if, in this case, it's a German language. So when we bring through our pricing, the dot, that's a decimal point here, will be turned into a comma automatically for us. Similarly with the measurements. So for example, so this is now running, it's doing its pre-translation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the diameter here to, let's say 7.3 or something with a decimal in it. Oh yes, and of course I need to give it the ability to show decimal points because of its formatting. And I'm now going to save this document. So that data will then get pushed into the German version. Similarly with the price list here, I am going to, let's say if I change this to a 20 bundle instead, and again, the pricing changes down to 5, and I can save my changes here. So if I quickly close the workflow view, and I go to my jobs tab, that might be one I forgot about before. Oh, same idea. What we can see here is that this is my current job, and this job is currently open by data sources. It's being pushed, and now I can open it for editing myself. So as a translator, I could export the translations for translating offline. I can open the document here for editing and translating in one2edit, depending on what I wanted to do. And what we can see is, for example, this is all translated already. There's some things in the master spread that aren't translated. I believe it's the date and stuff like that. But it's a normal translation workflow. We can see then that the German description has been brought through. We can see that the 7.3 diameter has been brought through. It's a comma in this case because it's a German language document. Similarly, the pricing has commas in there for the decimal separators. The pricing is correct. The batch size is also correct in this case. It's not written down, so I forgot the word. And yes, so we can see that we have got the ability to link in regional data into specific language version documents if you want to do that. Okay, and I'll jump back now to my slides. So all in all, there are multiple benefits to be reaped by using one2edit data sources. You can have significant time and cost savings over a manual workflow. You have more effective cooperation and input from all stakeholders worldwide. You've got improved quality due to the lower probability of human error. And of course, a welcome reduction in stress. And finally, we've shown how this new feature can help in some specific use cases that include, but are not limited to, price list localization, data sheets of templated data, financial and company reports. In fact, one2edit data sources can help with many template-driven documentation processes. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please enter them in the questions panel on the GoToWebinar interface. And while we're waiting for your questions, I'm going to run yet another quick poll about how you could see, or if you could see, one2edit data sources being useful in your organization. Quite a few under the other areas section. So please follow up and tell us, because we're always eager to know what it could be used for. Because, we don't think of everything ourselves, obviously, because we do what we do, and other organizations do what they do. But thankfully, nobody can see it not being useful. So I think we're hitting the right audience anyway. Okay, so we'll now go back to the Q&A part, and let's see what we can see. So there was one question asking about the Excel files. So when the Excel files are being opened here, if I just get out of the slides. What we have are the Excel files that are open here. They are being opened in my standard Microsoft Excel on my Office 365 on my laptop, but they are actually opening and they are being saved to the demo system via our one2edit global file system client, which let me just make it into a window as opposed to a pop-up. Preferences, open as window. Sorry, so that I can bring it over to this screen. So you can see here, there's a one2edit file system client. I can connect it to a one2edit system, to an asset space on a one2edit system that has been set up for the global file system. So this is something that we can absolutely cover with you. If you want to know more about it, please let us know, and we can do that. It is available for use on our systems, but it does involve setting up a new workspace using the global file system. There's another question here asking about, do you have to have all the data in the Excel if you're linking, let's say, for example, a product catalog? You only have to link the data that you need to. So as we showed here, you can have some technical data in one Excel file. You can have pricing in another Excel file. You could absolutely have the description just not linked from an Excel file. You don't have to have anything. So the description could have been, so the description that I've got here in my document, that could be in a translation workflow, for example. It wouldn't need to be anywhere near the Excel file. Or even if it was in the Excel file as well, it doesn't have to be linked from there. Another question about images. Currently, we've got, it is not possible to link images using data sources. So what we've got it on the plan though. It's on the roadmap for the next release. We had some tests with the idea of how one can link images from an Excel file, for example. Using a path or something. So that is something that we are looking into bringing in a future update, yes, for images as well. So that would obviously then allow you to update an entire row, in this case, of this price list, including the image here. And so there's another question there about how are we actually building up in the InDesign file. So we're not setting any variables per se. So the InDesign file is just as normal. As I said, any of the formatting with the red brackets or with the square brackets was being grep styled into red. It was purely for highlighting. So what you actually do is, if I just zoom in a little bit here to show you what it looks like. If I click, let's say on this is the product name from the top. Let's go back to here. And so from this particular product list, the gear shift up here, this is being linked straight in here. And what it's doing is through this data sources panel, we can enable the data sources. We choose which data source, the product list or the price list in this case, the Excel file. And we choose which worksheet from the Excel file, in this case, the product list. Then we choose cell 1A. And if we change the location of this, so for example, if we moved it down to row 2 or row 3, then row 3 is ART number, so we can see the value that's going to be linked into this cell if we move it back to gear shift. And if we make a change here, and this is, I mean, as I say, I'm working here on my laptop. If I make a change to my Excel file, oops, that wasn't the shift button, that was caps lock. So let's change that to gear shirt. When I save here, it is actually uploading it automatically for me because it's using the global file system, and the global file system which caches the data on my local system, but it synchronizes it up to the demo system. So it's not a manual upload download for every change. It's I can save my change and it works seamlessly. I don't need to do manual uploads and downloads. And so you can see that if I do pull, so I've saved my change here, and if I do pull the, we can see here it's outdated because I've made changes to the document or to the Excel file. I know that it's outdated, and I can pull through the latest data here, and it will be pulled into, in this case, just this one cell. If you add in rows, does it still remember the links? It'll remember the links, sure, but it'll remember the link to this particular address. So if I were to, for example, add in a new row here, this would push it down, and 1A would then be blank, and therefore this would be linked to a blank cell rather than to a cell with the product name in it. So it's being linked to a particular cell address in a particular worksheet in a particular Excel file. If you change and you manipulate and you carve up the Excel file, well then yes, it could move things out of the address that it's currently linked to. So it's not able to follow the data around inside the Excel file, because if you change the data and move it somewhere else, it's not even possible to follow it. Other options for data sources. So we don't have, currently it's Excel files only at the moment, and we don't have a different data source yet, but it is on the roadmap. We want to get it out first with Excel because we see a lot of people already using Excel as a place that they store their data. And in the future, then we want to add in different sources that can be useful as a data source. Apparently Word documents is one that would also be useful. But again, you're into, well, how do you link a particular sentence in a Word document? So it's something that we've got to look into. Excel files and maybe a database, like something like, I don't know, another database, at least it has a definite, structured format, whereas a Word document doesn't. So it will be a bit more difficult. A table in a Word document, though, might be possible. I don't know. The global file system, is it a separate application? The client is a separate client to download. Again, if you're on our Express system, you'd need to talk to your account manager and ask about setting up a global file system asset space. And it would need to be started from scratch. It's not something you can then just add into your current asset spaces on the Express system or on any system, to be honest. But if you're working on an enterprise system, you might be able to do it yourself. With Express, obviously, we'll have to set it up for you. But once we set it up, you can just install the client, and then you can use it seamlessly. It works in Windows, it works in Mac. I'm obviously on a Mac here, but it'll work in Windows as well if you want to start using it then to manipulate and manage your files. Would you need a sheet per product? No, absolutely not. So I've obviously divided everything up this way for the demo, just to show that you can have multiple files connected into a particular InDesign document. But obviously we could just have product list and price list as separate worksheets here. We could have them just as separate portions of exactly the same worksheet. So you can link to wherever you want to link to. If you were going to put it lower down, for example, in this worksheet, and then you added in more products up here, it would obviously then change the address down here, and that might not help things. You'd have to relink things. So having it on a separate worksheet would obviously be useful. One caveat is that if you wouldn't be able to put regional data on a separate worksheet in the same Excel file. So if you had, for example, you've got your sterling prices here, your pound sterling prices here, and then you had your euro pricing on a new sheet, because the addresses are linked to this sheet in this particular file, if I wouldn't be able to then externally, as we look back here, let's just close this. And if we look back in here, because of how we can relink a document, we'd have to relink to a new file. We can't just relink to a new worksheet in that same file. So there's a little issue there. Could we share the Excel file on the internet so a client could have access? Yes. So yeah, with the global file system, if the user has If you grant the user access to the asset space as normal in one2edit, they could install the global file system client, and then they could just edit the Excel file as well. And so your customer can simply come along, open the where's my Finder? So they could have this same access, for example, maybe not exactly the same access, but the access to a specific folder with an Excel file, and they can just double click, open the Excel file, make changes to it, save those changes, and those changes will be pushed to your InDesign files or their InDesign files, depending on how they look at it. Another point is that the global file system itself has change tracking as well. So whereas the history panel here would show the update is being made by data sources system, what it would actually, in the global file system itself, it would know that, okay, at this time on this date, this person came in and logged into the document and made changes or saved a new version of this Excel file. So it would be possible to look at it that way. If you needed more change tracking, I don't know if that gets covered by the GDPR or not, but that's for somebody else to work out. The GFS cost, I'm actually not sure of. I do know that the data sources itself is going to be a part of a standard update. So data sources will be, this is turning into a bit of a GFS Q&A. So data sources itself is part of a standard update. It'll be in version 3.12, which should be released definitely by the end of Q3 this year. And that'll just be a standard update. It'll just be a function you can turn on. Actually, it'll be in, if it's not enabled by default, you can find it in the client workspace settings, and you can turn on data sources here. And then the data sources tab will appear, and you can link in files. As far as the global file system itself goes, I am not sure regarding the cost or license agreement with it. The client is freely available. Once you've got global file system on, we can switch on the ability to install the client locally here through the help file, through the help menu in one2edit for those users. But as far as the cost goes, you'd need to contact your account manager about that. Again, it's kind of off-piste for this particular webinar. Okay. Any other questions coming in? No. All right then. In that case, I would say thank you all for attending, and excuse me. Does it? Yeah, so thank you all for attending, and we will feel free to contact us with any questions that you may come up with later via sales@one2edit.com. And again, those of you who have other areas as the places where you could see data sources being useful, please feel free to ping us and let us know what those other areas are, because again, it could feature into new features in our roadmap. So thank you very much for attending, and talk to you again.